Yo, what's the word, boys? Welcome back. It's time to talk about who will be the greatest UFC fighter in each division in 5 years. Who will be the GOAT? Like, subscribe, do all that. Let's get into it. For my flyweight GOAT, hold on. Hold your horses. Don't go fly into the comments. Oh, why is it not Demetrious Johnson? Why is it not Demetrious Johnson? It's all right. It's all good. We live in the same timeline as LeBron. We're good. The world's not going to end. I have Alessandro Pantoja as my flyweight GOAT in 5 years. I love Demetrious Johnson. He's one of the greatest of all time. You could argue him being the most skilled fighter of all time. But when making all-time lists, I value resume over skill set easily. I think resume is the most important thing when discussing where a fighter ranks all time. Who you beat is the most important thing. And right now, Alessandro Pantoja is building a much better resume than Demetrious Johnson. Now, is that DJ's fault? Not necessarily. The fighters of back then aren't as good as they are now. But Alessandro Pantoja is making a nasty resume. Brandon Moreno, multiple times. Brandon Royval, Steve Ursay, Kaya Sakura, and he's kind of lapping the division. He beat Kai Kara-France on the Contender Series, I think. Not Contender Series, Ultimate Fighter, the thing we don't really care about anymore. That was like a million years ago. He's beating so many guys. He's lapping the division. And honestly, I think he kind of has an underrated skill set. People talk about how he's kind of sloppy. He's kind of this, he's kind of that. But when you really dive into his film, he might be a top 3 chain grappler we have in the UFC. He's one of the best grapplers in the UFC. And you could look back to his fight with Kaya Sakura. His striking looked good. His striking is improving. If this man somehow gets a pretty solid striking base under him, man, oh man, he's going to be extremely hard to beat. I don't think anybody in the division is going to beat him. Who's going to beat him? I guess the guy with the best chance is Kai Kara-France. I think they should be fighting next. That's probably the best fight we could get in the flyweight division. But he's also lapping the division. He's beating everybody. He beat Kai Kara-France, as I said a million times, or previously. You know what I mean. He's beaten Brandon Moreno multiple times. He's beaten Brandon Royval, Steve Ursay. He's beaten, he's beaten Manel Kape. He's beaten Alex Perez. He's lapping everybody. So when you really discuss in 5 years, what's going to happen in 5 years? I don't think he loses to any flyweight now. And who's going to beat him in who's going to be the upcoming flyweights in 5 years? I'm not too sure. Now, maybe age is going to get to him and he won't be fighting in 5 years, but say he gets, on the low side, 6 more wins. That'll put him at, I believe 10 title fight wins, which will be 2 less than Demetrious Johnson. Sure, he's not as skilled as DJ, but I will absolutely take a little bit worse skill set and 2 less title wins if his resume is so much better than Demetrious Johnson. So in 5 years, I know it's a hot take. Don't rush to the comments. I do think the flyweight GOAT will be Alessandro Pantoja, but he simply won't get the respect out of the fans. He just won't. Regardless of what he does, a lot of the fans won't respect him because he is a flyweight and his name isn't Demetrious Johnson. So in 5 years, hey man, I think it's Alessandro Pantoja. Let's move to the Bantamweight GOAT in 5 years. Yeah, I think it's going to be Merab Dvalishvili. I think he's the GOAT already. When you look at his resume, it's disgusting. I feel like the Bantamweight GOAT, when discussing who's the Bantamweight GOAT out of every division in the UFC, it probably ranks at the bottom in terms of who's the GOAT. Is it Dominic Cruz? Is it Aljo? And when you compare that to other divisions, GSP or John Jones, you know what I mean? They're not on that level, so I feel like it was easier for Merab Dvalishvili, to get into this conversation. But yeah, I think he's already the GOAT. I know he only has 2 title fight wins, but look at his resume before even becoming champion. Henry Cejudo, Marlon Moraes. These guys are pretty high-level fighters. Petr Yan absolutely dominated him. He's got now wins over Sean O'Malley, Umar Nurmagomedov, who is one of the best fighters in the UFC right now. This man has a crazy, crazy resume, and it looks like nobody's stopping him. He's an absolute cheat code. His cardio is a glitch. It is a cheat code. I don't know if this man's human. I really don't know if this man's human. He seems unbeatable. His gas tank's a literal cheat code. If you think, oh, maybe I could beat him, I won the first and second round. No, you're not going to win. This man's going to bang 3, 4, and 5 in dominant fashion. This man's the Bantamweight GOAT. And in 5 years, This man's going to keep fighting. I think he loves fighting too much to retire soon. He's got more years. Maybe this man beats Father Time because his cardio is so damn good. So he's going to get more wins. The bantamweight division is stacked. The names on the resume are going to be insane. And there's no real competition for the bantamweight GOAT besides him. It's literally just Merab. And in 5 years, it will be only Merab by a quite substantial margin. Let's move on to the featherweight GOAT in 5 years. I have Ilia Topuria. He's 2 wins away, in my opinion, from being the featherweight GOAT. Right now, it is Alexander Volkanovski. I need to finalize my all-time list, but I do believe Alexander Volkanovski is in that 4 to 5 range, one of the greatest of all time. But when discussing Ilia Topuria, he is 1 or 2 wins away from overtaking Alexander Volkanovski. He KO'd Alexander Volkanovski brutally, and he knocked out Max Holloway, something nobody has ever done. He has the 2 best back-to-back wins in UFC history, Volkanovski by KO and Holloway by KO. That's pretty clearly the 2 best back-to-back wins in UFC history. I think he's the most skilled featherweight we've ever seen. We've never really seen a guy like Ilia Topuria in the featherweight division. We've never seen the combination of skills that he has, the boxing, the technique on the feet, the grappling, the wrestling. This man is an elite striker, and he's elite on the ground. We've never seen that in the featherweight division. Jose Aldo, great takedown defense, elite striker, didn't really have an offensive grappling and wrestling game. It wasn't elite. Volkanovski, pretty well-rounded, but he doesn't have a submission game like Ilia Topuria. Max Holloway, also pretty well-rounded, has an underrated wrestling base, I'd say, not to the level of Ilia Topuria. I think he's the most skilled featherweight we've ever seen, and he might have pretty soon the best resume we've seen in the featherweight division. I know it's not going to be as lengthy as Jose Aldo, but you guys get where I'm coming from. The combination of resume and skill set is kind of overpowered. The only thing I worry about when having Ilia Topuria in this conversation is if he moves to lightweight. The only thing that can keep him out of this conversation is himself, because if he moves to lightweight and leaves the featherweight division with only Volk and Holloway on his resume, I might still favor Volk in this discussion. But if he stays at featherweight, 1 or 2 more wins, Diego Lopez, Movsar Evloev, maybe a Volk rematch, he's the featherweight GOAT quite comfortably. And I think he moves up to lightweight and finds a lot of success. I think he can KO Islam Makhachev. I think he can finish Charles Oliveira, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, whoever it may be in the lightweight division. I think he finishes him. I think he's the best fighter in the UFC right now. He's that good. Let's move on to the lightweight GOAT. Ilia Topuria can give him some trouble. It is Islam Makhachev. As I said earlier with Merab Dvalishvili, Islam Makhachev is already the lightweight GOAT. I think the Renato Moicano win solidified him being above Khabib Nurmagomedov on an all-time list. He's got all-time wins. He's got 2 wins over Volkanovski. He's got wins over Dustin Poirier. He's got wins over Charles Oliveira, all by finish besides the one Volk fight. Those are all-time fighters. Dustin Poirier, I know he never won a championship, all-time fighter. Charles Oliveira, all-time fighter. And then Volkanovski, a top 5 UFC fighter of all time. He's dominant. He's beating these guys quite handedly. I know people are going to say, oh, the Volk fight was close. Yeah, it was somewhat close, but I think bias of fans kind of gets in the way. I had it 4-1 Islam Makhachev quite easily, and that's coming from a Volkanovski fan. It's coming from a guy who wanted to see Volk make history. So Islam is beating these guys quite comfortably. He also KO'd Volk. He also submitted Dustin Poirier and Charles Oliveira. He's beating these all-time guys very, very easily. So he's already the lightweight GOAT. Not to mention his skill set. I mean, come on. This man, if I could sum up one fighter in this type of term is, I don't even know if I explained that right, but Islam Makhachev is an impossible puzzle to figure out. His skill set is so good, but it's so complicated at the same time. You have a guy who comes out of Dagestan. He has elite grappling, elite wrestling, elite control on the ground. But on the feet, he is an amazing counter striker, and he barely gets hit. So how do you figure this guy out? Because are you going to win on the ground? Absolutely not. Sure, you may be able to win on the feet, but how are you going to close the distance and get inside and touch him up? Because this is the same guy who outstruck and outboxed Dustin Poirier in the pocket. He's very, very difficult to beat. And in 5 years, if he just keeps stacking wins, maybe he moves to the welterweight division. but he's going to be quite handily the lightweight GOAT. Maybe Ilia Topuria comes up and finishes him, but at this point in 5 years, I'm going to play it safe, and I'm going to go with Islam Makhachev. This guy might be the best fighter in the world. You could argue him and Topuria. So for now, we're going to keep it with Islam Makhachev. Let's move on to the welterweight GOAT, George St. Pierre. Oh my, they chopped that man. Why is he so blurry? I apologize, guys. But in the welterweight division, George St. Pierre will be the GOAT in 5 years. He's too well-rounded. He's got a resume. I know we fought guys a while back, but those guys aren't that bad. He's got a solid resume. He's extremely well-rounded in terms of the skill set. He kind of has everything when discussing an all-time list. And I don't believe there's any clear-cut contenders that can top GSP. I don't see any guys coming out in the next 5 years that's going to really compete with GSP. Maybe a few years ago, you could have argued Kamaru Usman, but I could also rebuke that or have a rebuttal that, I don't know if that makes sense. I can rebuke that statement and say, oh, GSP is probably more skilled than Kamaru Usman, and he's beating guys that are somewhat similar. Kamaru Usman's wins aren't that elite where I have to put him above GSP. Colby Covington twice, okay. Jorge Masvidal, Gilbert Burns, you know what I mean? He's not beating these all-time guys, so there's no clear-cut contender that I could see topping GSP in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years. There will be an insane welterweight that comes around that has the lighter man skill set. He's got the lightweight, featherweight skill at the welterweight division somehow, and he's just beating everybody, finishing everybody. Could have been Khamzat Chimaev, but he's a little bit too big. So for now, I have GSP. In 5 years, this man will still be talked about as the greatest of all time. Oh my God, I almost threw up. That would have sucked. Next up, the middleweight GOAT. I know, this one's kind of a hot take. I do have Khamzat Chimaev. Now, let me explain myself. First of all, his grappling is overpowered. It's a cheat code like Merab. I think you could really argue he is the best offensive grappler in UFC history. At the bare minimum, he's number 2. It's him and it's Khabib Nurmagomedov. Those are the 2 best offensive grapplers in the UFC in terms of getting the fight to the ground, controlling the fight on the ground, and maybe finding a submission. This guy is kind of underappreciated right now because I don't think people recognize how good this man is on the ground. He is ridiculously good on the ground, but he needs to fight. In 5 years, does he fight enough to really top Anderson Silva, who has a very, very lengthy career, who has a crazy win streak? That's the only thing I kind of worry about when talking about Khamzat Chimaev because he hasn't been too active in the past. Now, all those things aren't necessarily his fault, but he needs to fight. If he could get, I know this is talking crazy, but if he could win the title against Dricus du Plessis and, get 7 more title fight wins, I'm picking him to be the greatest of all time in the middleweight division. Now, I know his title reign won't be as long as Anderson Silva, but the resume will be better, and he's going to be finishing these guys in the first 2 rounds-ish. If Khamzat Chimaev becomes champion, I'm throwing hypotheticals out here. If Khamzat becomes champion and he has 6, 7, 8 title defenses, he's most likely finishing all of these guys and finishing most of them inside 2 rounds. So if this man is beating everybody, he's got a crazy resume, his title reign is pretty damn long, and he's finishing everybody inside 2 rounds, I don't know how you could say he's below Anderson Silva. Now, I know this is kind of a long shot, and I'm really trusting Khamzat Chimaev and his grappling, but I truly think this man is this skilled. So I'm picking Khamzat Chimaev to be my middleweight GOAT in 5 years. That one and the Pantoja pick, I know it's a hot take, but I truly believe it. I'm not going to throw any BS out here. I think Khamzat will be the GOAT in 5 years. Next up, the light heavyweight GOAT. Yeah, it is John Bones Jones. He's the GOAT. He is the greatest of all time, better than anyone, and he's going to be too hard to really overtake. He's got the resume. He's got the skill set. You could argue him having the best skill set we've ever seen in UFC history, and even though he's been fighting multiple generations now, his resume is really, really stacked, and he has the longevity. This man became champion at 21, 22, and now he's 37, and he's still champion. That's unheard of. That is unheard of, man. This man has been elite for a really, really long time. That's going to be hard to top. Alex Pereira won't be in the sport long enough. He's not well-rounded enough to really put him or for me to put him over Jon Jones. This one was quite easy. In 5 years, Jon Jones will probably be the GOAT still. So he's my pick for light heavyweight for obvious reasons. Let's move on to the final division, the heavyweight division. I think this is an obvious pick as well, and I am going with Tom Aspinall. I think he is the best heavyweight we have ever seen. I don't think we've seen a combination of skill like Tom Aspinall in the big boy division ever. The power, the speed, the boxing, the technique at heavyweight for being such a big dude is crazy. I think he beats Jon Jones. I think he finishes Jon Jones. Now, it's not a diss on Jones. Jones is smaller than Tom Aspinall. He doesn't have the power and the speed of Tom Aspinall. It's kind of the intangibles that Tom Aspinall really beats Jon Jones in a fight, if that makes sense. I think Tom Aspinall's power, his speed, his quickness, his ability to just win on being heavyweight. If you guys are picking up what I'm putting down, I think that's why he beats Jones. Jones is more skilled. Obviously, he's the greatest of all time, but it's the heavyweightness. The heavyweightness is why Tom Aspinall beats Jones, in my opinion. And besides Jones, I mean, come on. In 3, 4, 5 years, will there be any competition for this man? He's finishing everybody at the top of the division in like a minute. I just think he's too good. He's too good. I think he'll be above Stipe Miocic in a few years. Realistically, if he stays somewhat active, he'll be above Stipe Miocic, I think, in like 2-3 years. He's that good. Let me know what you guys think of my picks in the comment section down below. Drop your picks in the comment section down below. And subscribe if you guys like this content. I'm going to be pushing out a bunch of content just like this. Fun ranking videos, tier lists, hot takes. So click the subscribe button. I want to get to 10,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Drop in the comments, as I said, your GOATs in 5 years. Let me know what you think. Like, subscribe.